Hey everyone, welcome GC365. I am James and this is...
I'm Jeremy.
He is Jeremy Ayai and he is here to... That's not how you say his name, but it's fun how to say it that way. I'm going to start saying it that way because that's just a fun way to say your name.
Okay then.
Jeremy Ayai. Sounds like a recording artist. Anyhow, we are here to talk about our Bible in 1 Year daily reading. We are on day 187 today. 187. We're so far past half now.
Almost 200.
Almost 200. That would have been a cool show to do, the 200th episode.
Yeah,
but we are here. We're not as lucky. It's
Nope.
it's the nature of the beast. And we're going to talk in Chronicles today, which is a little tough to talk about because it's just a list of people at this point. So you're probably thinking, oh, this is just a list of people. But we're going to talk about that list of people, and it's going to be interesting because I'm prefacing it right now that it's going to be interesting. And then we're going to jump into Acts and Paul, and he's full on into the ministry. So before we get into Acts and Paul, let's get into Chronicles, right?
Yeah.
Chronicles this is an easy one. And you and I were talking about it, and you're like, there's not much here.
Yeah, my eyes glazed over in like the first 2 minutes of reading it, and I was just like, names.
Yeah, and more names. And then you're done, and you go to the next chapter, and you think, more names.
Yes.
And it's just names.
So and even the third bit was just more names.
It's just names. And you would think, oh, why would you even include this? But there's an importance to this. There's not only is there a historical significance to it because it's validating who's king, et cetera, because 200 years from then, this is all they have to go on. We know eventually these names lead to who?
To Jesus.
Jesus, right? And that's the big deal. That's the wow, okay, and that's what the names lead to. But before we get into it, I thought it was interesting that how Solomon was kind of mentioned in it.
Barely.
Right? He was barely mentioned. Here he is going to follow David. Well, technically he's following Absalom because Absalom was king for a bit too. But he's gonna be the next king. He's barely mentioned in here. I mean, he's not even the firstborn of his children. He's somewhere in the middle, right? So he's like a middle child, and he's just kind of an afterthought, right?
Yeah. He's very glossed over.
He is glossed over.
He wouldn't stick out to you if you were reading this out of context.
No. If you didn't know who Solomon was, it would just be Solomon, right?
Just another name.
Now I'm an oldest child, so I grew up oldest child. You know, my parents would always say, "You're the example. You've got to take care of your brother. You've got to, you're the person that has to do this, that." And I was that person. And my wife, who's also the first child, like I married an oldest child as well too. Same with her, and she had to be you're the example. Take care of your brother and sister. Blah 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 blah, and it's responsibility that we're given, but obviously Solomon's not given that. He's a middle child, and
I'm a middle child.
You're a middle child. Explains so much, Jeremy. You
Yeah,
really explains so much. When you told me that, the light bulb went off in my head, and I was like, middle child.
It makes sense.
Oh, like if you were to say I'm the only child, I'd have been like, oh, and you just start to understand people a little bit more.
You get a little insight.
You get a little insight. And then, there's that whole middle child syndrome. Is that the real thing? Is that a real thing?
Yes, very much so.
It's a real thing. There's like a FOMO yet an individualist kind of push and pull thing that's happening.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So then maybe Solomon was feeling that, where he was like, I got with these older brothers, especially Absalom. He goes nuts. Just tries to take the kingdom from David, dies in a tree. What a way to go, right? He has his hair stuck in a tree and then stabbed by a bunch of soldiers.
Sounds like a firstborn thing to do.
Yeah,
more than a middle child.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd get my hair stuck in anything. I'm pretty smart, so it's all good. But here he is doing this, but then eventually Solomon takes the kingdom, and not only does he take the kingdom, he is the most prosperous king. So if there's a moral or a lesson to be learned, it's apparently that middle children are the best.
And it's true. I can verify that.
You can verify that. So here he is, here's Solomon, and he goes through it, and it's so easy to gloss over these things and realize, or not even pinpoint the fact that there's so much that God is actually doing behind the scenes that we don't get to see. And that's why I do appreciate a Chronicles and those kinds of things and Numbers, because as much as I gloss over it, I realized that God is basically, he's building the building blocks like a Lego set. Like he's got the, it's the first 8 pages where you're like, what am I building? And all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is what I'm building.
It kind of looks like it.
Yeah. Oh, I get it. And I think that's what God is doing here is he's putting these blocks down to set something up, which we know is Jesus. And then of course people have interactions with Jesus and then their life changes, which goes to Paul nicely. Because here's Paul. He hated Jesus, has an experience with Jesus, and now he is one of the biggest defenders of Jesus, right? So right now we are in Acts 11 and Paul is arrested. Now, is he arrested for doing something wrong?
They think he's running a cult.
They think he's running a cult. So in their eyes, he's doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Although technically they all lied. So they knew he wasn't running a cult, right? They just said that because they knew that was a button for Felix, that if there's a revolution, you don't want to do that as the Roman commander. So he gets called in. And they just say all of these lies, right? Like Paul is doing a cult. He's a bad person. Paul is left-handed when he was really right-handed. Like they were just making stuff up.
That's a bad one though.
Is it?
Left-handed?
What's wrong with left-handed?
So much.
You make the most money as a major league pitcher if you're left-handed.
Okay. That's a very niche role though.
Doesn't matter. It still works. So who knows? Maybe there was some kind of Jewish major leagues that he could have been a part of, right? So you just never know. But here he is, and he is just absolutely being crushed. Just being crushed. And what is his reaction? Do you remember?
He just tells his story. He doesn't fight it back. He just tells them his truth, his story, what's going on in his life kind of thing.
It is. And he doesn't even just tell a story. In the beginning, he says, I do follow the way, right? Like he almost admits it's not a cult, and he tries to throw that out there. But I do follow the way. I do follow Jesus because I love Jesus, because he changed my life. And then he tells his story. He tells his story. And what does Felix do? Do you remember?
He believes him.
He does.
And still tosses him into jail.
Tosses him in jail for 2 more years. He just sits in jail. But it was like a modified jail where he couldn't leave, but people could come to him as much as they wanted. So
he's on house arrest. Basically.
Sort of like he was in jail, but it was like fancy jail. He was like stuck at a club, and they would bring him food, and they'd bring him
service and all that.
Yeah, they had room service for sure, and they had his 2:00 massage and spritz, and so it was good stuff.
To that jail.
You would go to that jail. I'd break the law for that jail. Yeah. I don't think I'd want to go to any jail.
I would follow the way for that jail at least.
I follow the way, and if I have to go to jail, then I have to go to jail. So here he is. Here's Paul, and he's doing this thing where he is just sharing his story. And I wanted to end with that we all have a story. Jeremy, you have a story. I have a story. Those of you guys watching, you guys all have a story. And God can use your story to minister and reach other people if you let it. Like if you allow God to use you and you allow God to take the stuff that he has done in your life to minister to other people. So our encouragement to you as we sign off here is use your story. Let God take your story to introduce himself to someone else. Let that be the reason why they connect with God. Have a great day, and we will see you guys tomorrow.
See you next time.